My family didn't invite me to Christmas because they said it's no place for losers, my brother Lucas said. I accepted it calmly and stopped financing his kids and his wife. Now he's freaking out. I was really looking forward to Christmas this year. For the first time, I wasn't rushing at the last minute. By the first week of December, I'd already bought gifts for everyone. My parents, my brother Lucas, his wife Amanda, and their children. Even extras in case someone brought unexpected guests. I felt this year would be special. I remember that as soon as December began, a sense of warmth filled my chest. Even though I'd never been the biggest fan of Christmas rush, dealing with holiday traffic, crowded stores, and last-minute gift wraps, I felt genuinely excited this time. In previous years, I often ended up in the mall on December 23rd or even the 24th, scrambling to find something decent for each family member. But the sense of being prepared early gave me unusual peace. Every gift bag, every piece of wrapping, paper, every bow on each present was my way of telling my family, I cherish you, and I truly did. That's why it felt like a hammer blow when I arrived at my parents' house, arms loaded with presents, and was greeted by my mother's tense expression. For a brief second, I thought I'd knocked on the wrong door, despite having spent most of my life in that same house. My mother opened it just enough to peer outside, her voice unnaturally stiff. "We don't want you here this year," she said. Her eyes flicked nervously to someone behind her. I blinked, half laughing from confusion, thinking maybe there was some strange family prank going on. But then I heard Lucas's voice echo from further inside. "This isn't a place for losers," he barked. "You're really getting on our nerves." Suddenly, everything felt surreal. The Christmas wreath was hanging on the door as always. The blinking lights were wrapped around the porch railings, and the scent of pine drifted in from the living room. But the hostility in my brother's voice was so foreign it robbed me of words. I could see my father standing back in the hallway, arms folded, looking at the walls like he hoped to vanish into them. My mother bit her lip and cast her gaze to the floor. In that instant, a storm of emotions welled up inside me. Confusion, anger, disbelief. My heart was pounding, but for some reason I didn't lash out. Maybe I was too shocked or too hurt to respond with the same aggression. All I managed was a shaky, "All right, if that's how you feel," before I turned around and walked back to my car. It's hard to describe how disorienting that walk felt. My thoughts ping-ponged between trying to figure out why Lucas would say that and how on earth my parents would stand by. My mother had always been a peacemaker, never wanting to see conflict among us, and my father, though quiet, usually stepped in whenever tensions rose. But now they were effectively pushing me out with him. The short, harsh words, "We don't want you here this year," were enough to make my skin crawl with embarrassment and anger. I slid into the driver's seat and placed the gift bags. On the passenger side, the bright holiday paper looking almost mocking now. I stared at them for a long moment, and in that silence, the full weight of what had just happened sank in. My family was shutting me out of Christmas for reasons I didn't understand. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe they were having a tough time, or maybe something else had happened that I didn't know about. But I kept circling back to Lucas's words. This isn't a place for losers. What the hell did he even mean by that? If there's one memory that stands out of that day, it's the smug satisfaction on Lucas's face when he delivered that line. It stung deeply. It felt personal, like a direct shot at something I'd either done or represented. But I had no clue where it was coming from. All year, I'd been helping him, covering some of his bills, sending money when he was short, paying for the kids' school materials. Was that enough to warrant being called a loser, or was there something else going on? I knew I needed answers. Running away without confronting them wouldn't give me any peace. So I mustered whatever courage was left in me, left the presents in the car, and marched back to the front door. My heart hammered like a drum in my chest. My mother opened it. Again, looking more anxious this time, perhaps expecting my return. I walked inside without waiting for an invitation, noticing how the place was decorated just like every other Christmas. Garlands on the banister, a tall Christmas tree in the corner glittering with lights. From the corner of my eye, I could see Lucas sprawled on the couch, phone in hand, acting like nothing unusual was happening. My father lingered in the hallway, and my mother hovered near the door. "All right," I said, my voice still surprisingly steady. "What's going on? Why am I not welcome at Christmas? What did I do?" Lucas barely lifted his head from his phone. "You really don't get it," he said with a snide grin. "You've been slacking lately. The kids hardly got anything from you this year." I blinked in confusion. "What are you talking about? I spent hundreds on gifts for your kids. They have more presents waiting in my car than anyone else in this family." He rolled his eyes. "Last year you did more," he retorted. "This year it's clear you don't care. It's embarrassing for us." I turned to my parents, hoping for some sign they would correct him or defend me. But my mother lowered her gaze to the floor, and my father seemed glued to the wall. An eerie silence followed until my mother blurted out, "But you just bought a new car. You found money money for that. At that point, I was speechless. I wanted to laugh at the absurdity. The car is financed, I explained, my tone clipped. And even if it weren't, how does that make me responsible for raising Lucas's kids? They're not my responsibility. Lucas shrugged, wearing the same smug expression. You're the one making more money. We're family. Families help each other. You've always done it. My eyes flicked to Amanda, who was standing near the kitchen doorway. Her face was beet red, and she stared at her hands like they held the secret to disappearing. She looked ashamed, but said nothing. Maybe she wanted to speak up, but feared Lucas's reaction. I couldn't be sure. I tried one last time to be reasonable. That's just what you think? I asked. That I'm required to give you money forever because I did so in the past? And if I don't, I'm a loser? Lucas gave a casual shrug. If the shoe fits, that was it. I felt a rush of heat rising to my neck. I turned to my parents one final time, searching for any sign that they would intervene or at least reason with him, but they just looked away. My mother's face was tense with discomfort, and my father avoided eye contact. All right, you're right, I said, voice cracking slightly. I don't belong here. I took a step back, addressing my parents with a shaky breath. Enjoy Christmas, I said. Then I looked squarely at Lucas. And good luck with those gifts, because this loser is done financing your life. I walked out without waiting for them to react, got in my car, and drove away, hands shaking on the steering wheel. I remember my vision blurring from tears. Tears of rage or pain. I couldn't tell. Probably both. The thought of spending Christmas alone tugged at my heart, but so did the realization that I'd basically been told I was worthless unless I paid for Lucas's lifestyle. When I got home, I parked in the garage and sat there, staring at the unopened gifts on the passenger seat. My thoughts spiraled. I recalled all the times Lucas said he was short on rent or struggling with car payments. All the times the kids needed something for school or sports. All the summer camps he told me would be so beneficial to them. I'd always stepped up because I believed I was helping. Now it seemed that the only version of me they welcomed was one who forked over money. Early the next morning, after a restless night, I made a decision. I was cutting off Lucas financially. I was done paying for everything under the guise of helping family, only to be disrespected and excluded like that. It wouldn't be easy. I loved my nieces and nephews and didn't want them to suffer for their father's behavior. But I needed to protect myself too. There's only so much you can do before you realize that some people see generosity as a weakness to exploit. I won't lie, cutting off Lucas weighed heavily on me. The first few days, I kept checking my phone, almost expecting a message or a missed call asking me why I'd vanished or whether I'd changed my mind. But there was nothing, just an eerie silence. Christmas came and went. My phone never rang. I sat in my living room on Christmas Eve, flipping through channels with that hollow feeling in my chest. I'd usually be with my family on this night. Maybe we'd be bickering about what movie to watch. Maybe I'd be helping my mother finish, wrapping gifts, or maybe we'd be joking over eggnog in the kitchen. Instead, it was just me. That loneliness stung. But every time I considered reaching out, I remembered the satisfaction in Lucas's voice when he called me a loser. That scene at the doorway replayed in my head like a broken record. I refused to let him or my parents treat me like an ATM. If their love was transactional, I couldn't pay into it anymore. As the days rolled on, I discovered a certain calmness. Sure, I was alone, but I no longer felt used. I no longer worried about the next guilt trip or the next phone call from Lucas claiming he needed help with an emergency. I tried to focus on my job and on reconnecting with a couple of friends I'd neglected in the past months. They invited me to a small New Year's Eve gathering. It wasn't family, but it was a reminder that there were people who genuinely liked having me around, whether or not I had deep pockets. About mid-January, I received a text message from an unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. This is Amanda. I'm really sorry about how everything happened. I don't agree with what they did. Lucas won't hear that from me, but I thought you should know. I must have read that message 4 or 5 times. Of all the people involved in what happened. At Christmas, Amanda was the last person I expected to reach out. She had been silently complicit that night, but maybe she was torn between her loyalty to Lucas and her sense that the whole thing was wrong. Despite feeling hurt by her silence, I replied, "Thanks, Amanda, but I can't just get over it." She didn't argue or try to keep the conversation going. Maybe she understood the depth of my hurt, or maybe she had her own problems with Lucas. Either way, that was that. Her brief text was like a small crack in the wall of resentment I was building. At least someone in that house recognized the wrongness of Lucas's behavior. Still, an apology didn't fix the fact that my parents and my brother had turned me away on Christmas, nor did it erase the words, "Here isn't a place for losers." By early February, I figured the entire fiasco had died down. I assumed Lucas got the message that I was done paying his bills. If he wanted to keep scapegoating me, fine, but I wasn't going to be part of it. One afternoon, I was working from home, in the middle of a conference call, when I heard loud knocking on my front door. I tried to ignore it, but the knocking became more insistent, borderline furious. I excused myself from the call, hurried down the hall, and looked through the peephole. Sure enough, there was Lucas, face flushed, hair disheveled, looking like he'd run a marathon. I braced myself and opened the door just a crack. "We need to talk," he declared, barging in past me before I could object. I stood there, arms folded. "About what?" I asked. "I thought we had nothing more to say to each other." "You need to stop this," he said, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "Stop acting like this and go back to helping out." I paused, baffled by his gall. "Helping out?" I repeated. "You mean paying for everything again?" "I already told you I'm done," he scoffed. "You're the one with the money. Do you know how hard it's been for us since you decided to act this way? The kids barely have what they need. Amanda's trying her best, but we can't do it without your help." A hollow laugh escaped me. "Do you hear yourself, Lucas? You're a grown man with a wife and kids. If you need more money, then earn more money. It's not my job to bankroll your life." He waved a hand dismissively. "You always helped before. Why are you being so selfish now?" That word, selfish, hit me like a slap. I clenched my jaw, recalling all the times I'd stretched my own finances to make sure he was okay. All the times I'd scrounged to send him money at the last minute. "Selfish?" I said, trying to keep my voice level. "You want to talk about selfish? Let's talk about how you lied to Mom and Dad about me, how you turned them against me, and how you banned me from Christmas for not spending enough on your kids. Now you're here demanding more. You've got a lot of nerve, Lucas." He opened his mouth to speak, but I raised a hand, cutting him off. "We're done," I said firmly. "I'm not giving you a single cent more, and I don't want to see you again until you've learned to be an adult." For a moment, he stood there with burning eyes, fists clenched at his sides before spinning on his heels and storming out. The echo of the door slamming reverberated through my house for a long while. I felt my heart hammering in my chest, part of me trembling with anger, part of me trembling with something close to sorrow. I couldn't believe how far our relationship had deteriorated. Still, I thought maybe that would be the end of it. Lucas would realize there was no more money to squeeze from me and move on, or at least focus on finding a real solution to his financial mess. I was wrong. A couple of days later, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Normally, I'd let it go to voicemail, but I was in the middle of a coffee break and picked up out of sheer curiosity. "Hello?" I said. "Hello, is this Michael?" said a polite male voice on the other end. "My name is Mark Dawson. I'm an attorney representing a client with concerns about certain financial matters involving your family. Do you have a moment to discuss this?" My stomach lurched. "My family? What kind of financial matters?" He cleared his throat. "I'd prefer not to discuss details by phone, but it relates to contributions you've made to your brother Lucas and questions about how those funds were used. I'm wondering if you'd be willing to come by my office. I assure you, this isn't a lawsuit against you. It's more an inquiry into suspicious activities." I felt tension grip my shoulders. My mind raced with possibilities. Had Lucas lied about some loan in my name? Was this a new trick to force me to pay? Despite the anxiety, I agreed. "All right, send me the address," I said. If there was something bigger going on, I needed to know. The next day, I drove to a modest office building downtown. I checked in at the receptionist's desk, and soon a tall, bespectacled man greeted me with a polite handshake, introducing himself as Mark Dawson. We went to a small conference room, where he offered me a seat at a plain wooden table. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I know this might be stressful. Let me get right to the point. The client I represent is Amanda." I drew back, eyebrows raised. "Amanda? My sister-in-law? Amanda?" He nodded. "Yes, she's contacted me regarding funds you've provided over the years to your brother Lucas. She has reason to believe he's been misusing that money, spending it on things he hasn't disclosed to either you or her. She wants to know if you're aware of any such activity." For a moment, I felt the floor wobble beneath me. Misusing money? Like what? My voice sounded distant. Mark slid a folder across the table. "We've obtained bank records showing that much of the money you sent was transferred into a separate account under Lucas's name, an account Amanda didn't know existed. From there, the funds appear to have been used for online gambling, hotel stays, and other personal expenses not related to household needs or the children." I opened the folder with trembling hands, scanning the statements. Deposits from my account to Lucas's main account, followed by subsequent transfers to a second account. Then, lines of transactions to gambling websites, fancy restaurant tabs, random pricey electronics. My stomach turned. All those times he told me he was behind on rent or that the kids needed uniforms, had it all been lies? Mark continued. "Amanda discovered these records recently. She'd had suspicions because their household expenses never matched what Lucas claimed. But she didn't have access to this second account until a paper statement was mailed to their home by mistake. Once she saw it, she came to me for advice." I sank back in my chair, a sick blend of anger and betrayal swirling in my gut. I had no idea," I said. "I thought I was helping my nieces and nephews. I thought I was helping him stay afloat, like a brother is supposed to. Mark softened his voice. I understand. Amanda wants to separate from Lucas. She's looking to secure full custody of the kids, given his financial deceptions and the impact on the family. She wants to know if you'd support her claim, if you're willing to share any information that confirms what we see in these statements. Images flashed in my mind. Lucas's sneer, my parents' silence, Amanda's quiet apology text. It all clicked. Lucas might have orchestrated that stunt at Christmas because he realized I was getting too cautious about giving him money, or maybe he just resented that I'd been suspicious. I felt a growing fire inside my chest. He'd not only manipulated me, he'd also put Amanda and their children at risk while gambling away the money. I met Mark's eyes. Of course I'll help. Show me what you need from me. He nodded, relieved. Thank you. Having your statement and any additional proof of how often you gave Lucas money will help Amanda's case. Leaving that law office, I felt numb. The city streets stretched out under an overcast sky, and the wind cut across my face as I walked to my car. I sat in the driver's seat, gripped the steering wheel, and let out a long breath. Memories of Lucas's requests came back in waves. The phone calls at odd hours, the desperate texts about one crisis after another, the times I'd rearranged my own budget to help him out. All the while, he was blowing that money on gambling and who knew what else. Back home, I spread out the documents on my kitchen table. It was all there in black and white. There was no denying it. The sense of betrayal was immense, like a pit in my stomach that kept growing. I felt foolish for not having seen any signs. But maybe the biggest sign was how he'd turned on me so viciously at Christmas, kicking me out, calling me a loser, just when I'd started to scale back my financial help. It suddenly made chilling sense. I called Amanda. She sounded relieved I was willing to cooperate. She told me quietly about the arguments they'd been having, how Lucas often came home in a foul mood, how money always seemed to vanish without explanation. She apologized for staying silent that night, saying she felt cornered by Lucas's temper. She also told me she'd found receipts indicating that he'd been gambling online for years, draining more money every month. He promised me over, and over that he wasn't doing anything suspicious, she said, voice trembling. But the kids started noticing how we never had enough for them, and I just kept believing him. I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner, I assured her. It wasn't her fault. Lucas was obviously skilled at manipulation. We talked about her lawyer's plan. They would move to freeze his accounts, preventing him from emptying them once the separation process started, and gather more evidence of misuse of family funds. I let her know I'd compile all the records of transactions I'd kept, bank statements, text messages from Lucas, anything that proved how he'd consistently asked me for money under false pretenses. As expected, once the accounts got frozen and Amanda made her move for separation, Lucas exploded in anger. He showed up outside my house again one evening, pounding on the door. This time, I didn't bother letting him in. I opened the door just an inch and glared at him. "You're behind this," he snarled, practically foaming at the mouth. "You froze my accounts, got Amanda to take away my money. You're trying to destroy me." I stood firm. "You destroyed yourself, Lucas," I said calmly. "I just made sure people saw the truth. Now you can't hide it or lie about it. All those times you took my money to gamble, did you think that would never come out? You think I won't fight back? You think you can ruin my life like this and get away with it?" He spat. I gripped the door. "Ruin your life. You ruined Amanda's life, your kids' lives, and let's not forget, my Christmas. You could have just told me the truth, asked for help to fix your gambling problem, but instead you lied and used me." He started to advance, and I slammed the door in his face. Through the wood, I heard him yelling curses, threats, telling me I'd regret it. After a few minutes, he stormed off. I stood on the other side, heart pounding, but a strange calm settled over me. I realized that this time I didn't feel guilty. I had no regrets about cutting him off or exposing his lies. Lucas had orchestrated his own downfall. Unable to deal with me directly, Lucas went straight to our parents. A day later, my phone buzzed. I saw my mother's name on the screen and hesitated before answering. She sounded distressed. "Michael, how could you do this to your brother?" she asked, her voice filled with both confusion and disappointment. "Lucas is suffering so much right now. He says you froze his accounts and that Amanda's leaving him because of you. What's going on?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Mom, if you want to know what's really happening, I'll come over tomorrow and show you everything." The next day, I arrived at their house with the folder of evidence in hand. My father answered the door, his expression unreadable, while my mother looked anxious, sitting in the living room with her hands clasped together. I placed the folder on the coffee table and began laying everything out. Each page told a piece of the story: bank transfers, gambling transactions, withdrawals from Lucas's secret account. "This is where the money I sent him went," I said, keeping my voice firm but calm. "It didn't go to his kids or to pay the bills or to help Amanda. It went to gambling, to hotels, to things he lied about. He manipulated all of us. My father leaned over the table, quietly scanning the documents. His face grew tighter with every page. My mother, however, tried to rationalize it. Maybe he was under too much pressure, she said softly. He made mistakes, but he's your brother. Can't you forgive him? Mistakes? I repeated, my tone sharper now. This wasn't a mistake, Mom. He deliberately lied to me for years, took my money, and used it for himself. And when I started pulling back, he turned you against me. He called me a loser and kicked me out of Christmas. And now you're asking me to just forgive him? My father finally spoke, his voice low and heavy. I didn't realize it was this bad, he admitted. Lucas always made it sound like you were overreacting, like it wasn't a big deal. He paused, shaking his head. But this is something else. My mother stayed quiet after that, her eyes fixed on the pile of evidence. For the first time, I saw the cracks in her unwavering defense of Lucas. I could tell she wanted to keep protecting him, but the truth was undeniable. Before I left, I told them, I don't expect you to choose sides, but I won't let Lucas keep using me or anyone else. If he wants to fix his life, he needs to take responsibility for what he's done. Until then, I'm done. They didn't argue. My father nodded silently while my mother looked down, clearly conflicted. In the following weeks, Lucas's life continued to unravel. Amanda filed for separation and was granted full custody of the kids. The frozen accounts meant he couldn't access the money he'd hidden, and with debts piling up, creditors started closing in. His reputation took a hit when Amanda and I shared the truth with close friends and family. People who once supported him began to distance themselves, realizing the extent of his lies. Lucas tried to confront me again in public during a family gathering, his anger boiling over. You've ruined everything, he shouted in front of everyone. You turned everyone against me. I stood my ground, calm but firm. No, Lucas, you did this to yourself. You lied, you stole, and now you're facing the consequences. Stop blaming everyone else. The room was silent as he glared at me, his face red with fury. But he didn't have a response. He stormed out, leaving behind the uncomfortable silence of people who had finally seen his true colors. Amanda, meanwhile, began rebuilding her life. She found a stable job, enrolled the kids in a better school, and started to regain the sense of independence she had lost during her marriage to Lucas. She thanked me more than once for standing by her and helping her expose the truth. Watching her and the kids thrive gave me a sense of peace, knowing that at least they were no longer trapped by Lucas's selfishness. As for me, the experience left its scars. I couldn't help but feel betrayed by someone I had trusted so deeply, someone I thought would always be family. But it also taught me the importance of boundaries. I learned to protect my generosity and not let guilt or obligation lead me into toxic situations. The next Christmas, I celebrated in a different way. I hosted a small gathering with friends who truly cared about me, people who valued me for who I was, not for what I could give them. It was a simple celebration, but it was filled with genuine warmth and joy. For the first time in a long while, I felt free. Lucas, on the other hand, faced the full weight of his decisions. Isolated and drowning in debt, he became a shadow of the person he used to be. He tried to repair his reputation, but the damage was too great. People no longer believed his excuses or felt sorry for his plight. He was left alone to confront the mess he had created. Sometimes I think about whether I could ever forgive him. Maybe one day, if he truly changes, we could rebuild something. But for now, I've let go of the need for his approval or his redemption. I've moved on, and I've found peace in knowing that I stood up for myself and for what was right. This chapter of my life was painful, but it taught me invaluable lessons about trust, boundaries, and self-respect. Family doesn't mean unconditional sacrifice, and love doesn't mean enabling someone's worst behaviors. It means honesty, respect, and mutual care, and when those things are gone, it's okay to walk away.